Poor thing. You look like you've been through so much. Did the relief agency send you? Do you mind if I have a look at your card? They did give you a card, right? I can't let you in until I see your pass. I can wait while you look for it. I understand. Shukran. Well, serendipity is on your side because one of our rooms just opened up. And thankfully, it's for the happy reason, not the sad mourning reason this time. Yeah. Yes, Andromeda is fully recovered and has been launched into her fantastic new life mission. Yes, we are. We are very happy for her, but even happier for humanity. Come on in. Yeah. If you need help with your luggage. Oh, you just have what's in your backpack. Well, in that case, you can be grateful that your load has been lightened and you're ready to start anew. Nothing as liberating as a good old fresh start. Oh, I know. It doesn't feel that way now, but you'll see. Well, I'll see. And if it's any consolation, we've had so many more come through with even less than a backpack. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's tough to get through there. You might have to squeeze a little. Yeah. Take off your shoes, please. Sure, take a look around. This is where you'll be staying for a while. You might as well get acquainted with your new environment. Why don't you tell me what happened? Sit down over here. That's it. And start from the beginning. And tell me why you're feeling so trepidatious. Don't worry, it's not going to make it worse by talking about it. I certainly won't make it any worse. Or I'll try my best not to. Uh-huh. Yes, that would be destabilizing. I agree. Of course you've questioned your identity and your worth. Of course you feel knocked off balance. Wow. You have suffered a lot. So many changes that you've experienced at once. And it sounds like you had to do it all alone. Oh, here. You're not alone. Not now. Oh, it's okay. You feel like life doesn't make any sense now. And everything you thought that you knew about life was wrong. I see. Well, in 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. Robert Frost said that. And he didn't say it to invalidate your pain. On the contrary. I hear you. I hear you. Well, if it's okay, I'd like to share some very special and powerful words with you. Some wisdom. Will this work? Yeah, I know it doesn't look like much. But you can't even imagine what kind of treasures it holds. So much in here to help you deal with what you're feeling right now. What's it called? It's called What to Do in a Crisis. I know, it's such a blunt, unornamented title for such a magical book. It sounds too clinical for you. Oh, it's not like that at all. It's very much alive and full of the chaos and real feelings of real humans, just like you, who've suffered too. Well, you know, every human who has ever breathed the air of this planet has suffered. And not just individuals, whole tribes, societies, nations, all at once. But to make sure someone can actually get through this book in less than a single lifetime, whoever edited it had to select the voices and cries of just an weensy sliver of humans who've suffered. Who wrote it? Well, no one knows exactly. Everyone? All the ones? Doesn't matter. All that matters is that the universe felt it was important enough to gift it to us. You don't feel much like reading right now? It's hard to focus. Well, that's totally understandable. Don't stress. How about I do all of the reading? You just lie down there and absorb whatever you have an appetite for. If you fall asleep, I'll even keep reading to guide you through the land of dreams and epiphanies. How's that sound? I'd be more than glad to. I love this book. I'm sure you will too. What to Do in a Crisis by Anonymouses. You look comfy cozy over there. It's good. Getting settled in. Jesus wept is the shortest verse in the Bible, but arguably one of the most powerful. Don't worry, this is not a Christian book. It's an ecumenical for everyone kind of book. We often think of humans' abilities to use reason and language and make tools as our species' defining features. All of these abilities are simply ways of dealing with the most guaranteed, universal, and defining experiences of being alive: suffering. It is baffling and trope-defying to think of a god experiencing suffering. After all, didn't we invent gods to be above and beyond all of that? Yet, our ancient ancestors knew that no god could really understand the human experience, and devise an escape plan without going through some shit, without suffering themselves. So, Jesus suffered. Jesus wept. In fact, you can't create any religion or philosophy, any work of art, tech gadget, advertising campaign, movie, meme, or greeting card. You can't create anything at all without acknowledging and experiencing suffering. Marketers are constantly searching for your pain points to figure out how to get your attention and your money. So, if hucksters, shysters, cult leaders, multi-level marketers, and salesy people have detailed intel on your pain points, shouldn't you get intimate with them too? Shouldn't you also have some hacks for how to heal your own wounds before others with ulterior motives get to them? We thought so, and that's why we put together this guide. We hope this manual reaches you before you reach a personal or pandemic level crisis. Cognitively, it's better to absorb this wisdom when you're in a relaxed, calm state of mind. But realistically, you're most likely reading this because there are some feces particles flying around, propelled by an oscillating motor with blades attached. And that's okay. Don't panic. Most humans work better under pressure anyway. If you're already drenched in poo at the epicenter or the periphery of a shitstorm, you don't have much time. So the first step in managing a crisis, any crisis, is a review of the literature on human responses to crises. So we begin with a stroll through our species' history of suffering and overcoming suffering. We'll start with the origins of suffering. Our species has taken great delight in imagining that pain and suffering were not part of the original design plans. For so long, it was in vogue to imagine that the earliest humans lived in anguish, anguishless bliss, in a free of charge, sumptuous, all-you-can-eat buffet of a garden, and that it was human stupidity, greed, lust, pride, envy, or whatever, some human foible that put a price, limits, and conditions on accessing food, shelter, nourishment, and good views. Nice try, humans. Good effort. You get 10 out of 10 for a great use of imagination to develop disciplinary tactics. But these are just invented narratives. Fake news spread by control freaks, guilt trippers, and bullies. Here's the real scoop. Suffering has been the foundation, the motivating force of humanity from day one. But for a good reason. Every invention, discovery, tonic, work of art, story, joke, clay pot, sharpened stone arrow, etc., has been birthed from someone's attempt to alleviate suffering, even if that suffering was just caused by boredom. You owe your world to your ancestors, to your great-grand times 300 suffering. You owe your reduced suffering to their suffering. They labored, they wailed, trekked, lost sleep, went without, risked being committed, walked out, executed, or excommunicated, just so you wouldn't have to suffer as much as they did. In the midst of a great tribulation or trial, they carried on, experimented, and documented the results, fueled by the hope that you would never have to go through what they went through. Have you ever thought about why humans tell stories? For entertainment? Yes. And they also invented storytelling to warn you, and guide you through, and save you from suffering. Evidence that our earliest ancestors told stories is proof that suffering is a very ancient experience. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest story we have any record of. It was written around 4,000 years ago and tells the story of a Sumerian king named Gilgamesh and his tragic search for immortality. You'd think that a tale as old as that wouldn't have much to offer us today in dealing with crisis. Quite the opposite. It tells us everything we need to know about how to deal with desperation. Here are its instructions. Embark on a terrifying quest to find the one who knows how to endure the inevitable suffering of this life, and then pass your learning along to future travelers on the same road. There are natural forms of suffering that humans, at least before climate change, had no hand in unleashing or controlling, like tornadoes, volcanoes, droughts, floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, insect infestations, mudslides, wildfires, and disease pandemics. When your suffering is caused by a natural disaster, it can be ultra frustrating because there's no one to blame or to sue or to demand retribution against or restitution from. Looking up at the sky after a flood destroyed your home, your business, your everything, and seeing a rainbow offers little consolation. It won't matter if you sandbag your house, go to confession or communion, wear a cross or bulbs of garlic around your neck, or take any other prescribed precautions. There's no guarantee that the forces of nature won't strike again. You can defend against, but you can't defeat or predict the forces of nature. They're too wild. anyone knew this, it was your more dependent on nature ancestors. Some of the best advice comes from the Stoics. Who else, right? You're still awake. It's debated whether he was a Stoic or not, but Boethius's Riches to Prison story offers a lot of guidance. Boethius was a 6th century Roman senator who was stripped of his status and wealth and thrown in prison by his enemies, where he died, but not before penning the Consolations of Philosophy. From prison, he wrote, "So dry your tears. Fortune has not yet turned her hatred against all your blessings. The storm is not yet broken upon you with too much violence. Your anchors are holding firm, and they permit you both comfort in the present and hope in the future." He also wrote, "All fortune is good fortune, for it either rewards, disciplines, amends, or punishes. So fortune is either useful or just." Boethius wanted to remind us that suffering is necessary for change, growth, leveling up. If you wield suffering in just the right way, you can turn it into something beneficial and maybe even beautiful. And the more suffering you experience, the stronger your compulsion will be to send out SOSs to your contemporaries and descendants. As miserable as life can be, Boethius reminds us that nothing is miserable unless you think it so. And on the other hand, nothing brings happiness unless you are content with it. So you just have to learn to see the beauty in gray, cloudy skies and be content without the sun for a while. And remember, as bad as things seem, the wheel of fortune will spin again and again and again during your lifetime. You can count on that. If there's one predictable thing about the wheel of fortune, it's that it keeps spinning. Let's talk about the suffering that humans inflict on each other. Because not all suffering is caused by random chance events. The most extreme forms of human on human caused suffering are horrific to even think about. If you feel disgust, anger, and unfathomable sadness when you think about genocide, slavery, or poverty, that's a solid pass on your psychological health check. If there's anything that you should get angry and sad about, it's genocide, slavery, poverty, inequality, and war. It's not fun or relaxing to talk about any of these things. It's not pleasant at all, I know. But can you imagine what a crisis having to deal with any of these problems is? Can you imagine what it's like to have the humanity and dignity stripped from you, and every member of your ethnic, cultural, or religious group through the practice of slavery? Crises of paralyzing proportions. But even when overworked, beaten, and underfed, slaves have still found the strength to rise up, to hope, to laugh, to feel joy, and to escape. When you're going through a crisis, think often of Harriet Tubman. Born into slavery, she was beaten often, and one of those beatings left her with a permanent head injury. For the rest of her life, she suffered from epilepsy and narcolepsy because she had tried to protect another slave. The upside, yes, there is an upside of that traumatic brain injury, was that Harriet experienced vivid visions and dreams that empowered her to become a liberator, a champion, and an inspiration to generations of humans who came after her. Although Harriet managed to escape and gain her own freedom, she returned to the South 13 times and freed more than 70 slaves. 70 slaves. Before slavery was officially abolished. So when you're in a crisis, remember that Tubman, a verified expert on slavery, described slavery as the next thing to hell. But even after experiencing that hell, she composed this meme-worthy quote: "Every great dream begins with a dreamer." Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars and to change the world. So, according to Tubman, what you should do in a crisis is 1. Acknowledge that you're in a crisis. 2. Harness the power of your dreams and get dreaming and scheming. And 3. As hard as it is, find strength within yourself to help yourself. Then get yourself to safety. And once you're safe, then go back into the pits of hell to rescue others. Harriet Tubman reveals to us that the weapons for fighting human suffering are within you, within me. When you've lost faith in humanity and hope for our future, because all you see around you reflects the darkness and the most hateful and divisive dimensions of the human species, remember the words of Mr. Rogers. When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, "Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping." When you fill your news feed with stories of more helpers than hurters, these optimistic words from Chuck Bukowski will ring true. There is light somewhere. It may not be much light, but it sure beats the darkness. Be on the watch. The gods will offer you chances. Know them. Take them. The gods wait to delight in you. The next chapter of the book is about the Black Death, the bubonic plague. You want to hear this? All right. While deadly viruses and bacteria seem to be a curse from God to medieval peoples and beyond their control, aside from doing their best to avoid and repent from sin, fortunately we now know, thank you science, that plagues can be managed through human actions. We're not just talking about masks, hand washing, and social distancing. Yes, those are important, but poverty, poor health caused by poverty, stress, being overworked and undernourished, and forced to work under hazardous conditions, and live in crowdy, crummy housing increases the risks. Europe's landowning classes seem to know this, because they fled the cities during the plagues and evaded death that way, leaving the poor behind to die and bury the dead. Here's what the Black Death was like according to one Italian eyewitness. Father, abandoned child, wife, husband, one brother, another. For this illness seemed to strike through the breadth and sight, and so they died, and none could be found to bury the dead for money or friendship. Members of a household brought their dead to a ditch as best they could, without a priest, without divine offices. Great pits were dug and piled deep with the multitude of dead, and they died by the hundreds, both day and night. And as soon as those ditches were filled, more were dug, and I, Agnolo de Tura, called the fat, buried my 5 children with my own hands. And there were also those who were so sparsely covered with earth that the dogs dragged them forth and devoured many bodies throughout the city. There was no one who wept for any death, for all awaited death, and so many died that all believed that it was the end of the world. This situation continued from May until September. I know that's grim, but here are 2 takeaways about the Black Death, about plagues, about pandemic crises in general. 1, they are a not so subtle reminder to us of our interconnectedness, our interdependence, and the effects economic inequality can have on all of us because of this interdependence. The lesson is, you are your brother's and your sister's keeper. If you've been serendipitous enough to escape infection, then do what you can to help the afflicted. That goes for disease as well as many other afflictions. The second lesson is looking at Agnolo de Turo, the Fats, reports from the 14th century. We understand that the feeling on the ground was that so many died that all believed that it was the end of the world. If you're reading this manual from any year following 1348, when the Fat wrote those words, you know that even though humanity suffered greatly during this time, the world did not end. In fact, in 1348, the world's population was 475 million. So compare that to the world's population in whatever year you're reading this from. And assuredly you'll see that the world did not end in the 14th century. we have not only survived, lived on, to thrive and fight and create again and again. You are getting sleepy. You've been through so much. That's perfectly understandable. Let me just leave you with a selection of my favorite quotes from the remaining chapters of What to Do in a Crisis. Okay. Gift you just the right words. Just the right words. Oh, okay. The American Depression of 1929 that led to the New Deal. Let's just take a look at that before you drift off. Here's how one politician described the Great Depression. What the New Deal that came after means to me is an era of acute social consciousness and a realization of mutual responsibility, a time of reciprocal helpfulness, of greater understanding and willingness to work together for the good of all. It's from Harold Ickes in 1936. I was going to read you another quote. You can see your eyes getting so droopy. We'll let you rest now, but before you enter the land of dreams, prepare yourself to receive your instructions, a vision of your mission. Because you were brought here and now for a reason. Don't you know that? It's true. So as you cross over into the healing world of dreams, remember, you're an explorer, and you represent our species. And the greatest good you can do is to bring back a new idea. Because our world is endangered by the absence of good ideas. Our world is in crisis because of the absence of consciousness. Terence McKenna said that. Okay, dream, my precious. Dream prolifically.